The world is a vast, chaotic thing, isn't it? Billions of lives, all moving at once, each one a different story, a different path. And most of the time, we just exist within our own little bubble, convinced that our story is the only one that truly matters. We go to work, we come home, we scroll through our phones, and we feel a little lonely, a little disconnected. We tell ourselves it's just the modern condition, a part of being human in a digital age. But what if that feeling, that gnawing, hollow ache in the back of your soul, wasn't just loneliness? What if it was the echo of a story you didn't even know you were a part of? A story that was deliberately, brutally kept from you? Eleanor Vance knew that feeling all too well. She was a woman in her late 30s, living in a quiet apartment in Seattle, her life a carefully arranged collection of predictable rituals. Her days were spent hunched over a canvas, lost in the swirling, melancholic colors of her abstract paintings. Her nights were for quiet music and the endless, mesmerizing scroll of her phone. She was an only child, and her parents, bless them, had given her a childhood filled with love and warmth. Yet, for as long as she could remember, there had been a whisper of something missing. A profound, almost spiritual solitude that no amount of friendship, no amount of family love, could ever quite fill. It was a sense of incompleteness, like a song with a missing note, a painting with a gaping, empty space. One Tuesday night, the rain outside her window was a soft, steady rhythm, and Eleanor was wrapped in a blanket, mindlessly swiping through the short-form video vortex that is TikTok. Most of the time, it was a blur of fleeting distractions. Silly dances, cooking hacks, cute dogs. But then, a video appeared that brought her thumb to a sudden, absolute stop. It was a simple video. A young woman, maybe a little younger than Eleanor, with rich mahogany-brown hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders, sat on a worn leather sofa. She was playing a guitar, singing a hauntingly beautiful, original song about lost dreams and found hope. The video was short, barely 30 seconds, but it was enough. Eleanor didn't know why, but a jolt of recognition, sharp and undeniable, shot through her. It wasn't a sense of, I know her. It was something far stranger, far deeper. It was a sense of, I am her. The woman on the screen was Eleanor. Not a look-alike, not a doppelganger. It was her face, her eyes, her very expression. It was the way her mouth curved when she hit a certain note, the tiny flicker of uncertainty in her gaze before she smiled. The camera zoomed in for a moment, and that's when Eleanor saw it. Right there, a little crescent-shaped birthmark, just above her left eyebrow. The exact same one Eleanor had. The one her mother always joked about, calling it her tiny scar from an angel's kiss. Her heart started a frantic, pounding rhythm against her ribs. She replayed the video, and again. The birthmark was unmistakable, a physical impossibility. The woman in the video, she couldn't be a stranger. This wasn't some cosmic coincidence, not with that mark. It was too specific, too personal. It was a secret her body shared with no one. Until now, Eleanor's hands began to tremble. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of disbelief and a terrifying, exhilarating hope. Who was this woman? And more importantly, why did she look exactly like Eleanor, down to the smallest detail? Eleanor's parents had always been upfront with her about everything. She was born in a small community hospital just outside of Portland, Oregon. A single, healthy baby. No complications. No secrets. So how could this be possible? She had to know more. She clicked on the woman's profile. Her name was Rosemary Finch. The profile was public, a vibrant collage of short musical clips, snapshots of her life on the road, laughing with friends in sunny California. Rosemary was a traveling musician, and her life seemed a world away from Eleanor's quiet, solitary existence. But the face was undeniable. The face was Eleanor's. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. This was a nightmare, or a dream, or something far, far worse. What if it was a scam? A deepfake? A cruel prank? But she could see the natural light, the texture of the old sweater Rosemary was wearing. This wasn't digitally manipulated. It was real. And the birthmark, so distinct and unique, felt like a screaming siren, a blaring alarm bell demanding her attention. Her parents. She had to ask her parents. But what would she say? Mom, Dad, I saw a woman on the internet who looks exactly like me, and she has my birthmark. Am I a twin? The very words felt insane. The kind of thing you read about in tabloids, not something that happens to a quiet artist in Seattle. But the feeling in her gut was screaming at her. This wasn't a whim. This was destiny. A terrifying, beautiful, and deeply unsettling destiny. It was as if her entire life, her entire sense of identity, was now balancing on a knife's edge, ready to shatter into a million pieces. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. All she could do was watch that video over and over again, the haunting melody of Rosemary's song a constant loop in her mind, the sight of her own face, a stranger's face on a screen, a constant, dizzying reality. This was a secret waiting to be unearthed, a mystery whispered into existence by an algorithm, and Eleanor knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was the one who had to dig it up. The weight of it all was overwhelming. Her parents, their quiet life, her belief that she was an only child. All of it felt like a fragile, beautiful lie. A lie she was about to expose, and she had no idea what she would find on the other side. She could reach out to Rosemary, send her a message. But what if she was rejected? What if Rosemary thought she was crazy? What if this was a mistake? But the birthmark, it kept pulling her back. A tiny, perfect mark. A silent, indisputable witness to a truth that was about to change everything. She wasn't alone in the world. She wasn't incomplete. There was a missing piece. A part of her she didn't even know was gone. And she had just seen it, singing a melancholy song on a viral video. Her heart ached with a longing so intense it felt physical. She wasn't just looking at a stranger's face. She was looking at a half-remembered reflection. And she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The world felt smaller now. Every day that passed, Eleanor found herself slipping deeper into the rabbit hole, the face of Rosemary Finch becoming more real, more a part of her life than the people around her. It was a dangerous, obsessive fixation. She had tried to talk to her parents, to ask them about her birth, to probe for a secret, but their answers were always the same. So loving, so reassuring, and yet so utterly unsatisfying. They had told her she was a Christmas miracle, a baby born on a cold winter night, a gift they had prayed for. They had given her their entire world, their entire love. But the details were sparse, too simple. A quick birth, a healthy baby, a joyous ride home. She was an only child. Period. The finality in their voices was almost a wall, but Eleanor now had a key to a door she didn't know existed, and she couldn't stop herself from turning it. So she went online. She scoured old hospital records, birth announcements from the local papers, anything she could find from the time she was born in that small community hospital. Nothing. It was a dead end. Every official record confirmed she was a single birth, a lone baby named Eleanor Vance. But the digital ghost of Rosemary Finch was everywhere. Her musical videos, her tour dates, her quirky blog posts. Eleanor learned that Rosemary was a singer-songwriter, a free spirit who had grown up in the sun-drenched suburbs of Southern California. She had been adopted by her parents, the Finches, a fact she spoke about openly and with gratitude. Her parents had a story too. A closed adoption, a young mother who couldn't care for her, a simple, happy ending. Two parallel lives, so similar, yet so profoundly different. Eleanor knew she had to reach out. She agonized over the message for days. How do you approach a stranger online and accuse them of being your long-lost twin? The message she finally drafted was simple, almost painfully honest. Hi Rosemary, this is going to sound crazy, but I saw one of your videos. We look exactly alike, and we have the same birthmark above our left eyebrow. I was just wondering, where were you born? It was a shot in the dark, a plea into the digital void. And she waited. The silence was deafening. A new kind of loneliness that was even more potent than the one she had always felt. She was sure Rosemary had seen the message and blocked her, thinking she was a lunatic. But then, 3 days later, a reply came. It was short. You're not the first person to say this. "What's your name?" The tone was cautious, maybe a little weary. Eleanor's heart leapt into her throat. She replied, giving her name, her age, and a few more innocuous details. And then the messages started to flow, at first a trickle, then a flood. They didn't jump straight to, "Are we twins?" Instead, they built a bridge of small talk, of shared interests. The conversation was slow and tentative, like two strangers dancing around a fire, afraid to get too close. They discovered they both hated the smell of cilantro, found comfort in the same old black and white movies, and had an unusual fear of heights, despite never having had a traumatic experience with them. It was a bizarre, surreal mirroring of two lives that had never intersected. The conversation eventually turned to their stories. Eleanor shared her upbringing, the happy, uneventful life of an only child in the Pacific Northwest. Rosemary shared hers, the adopted child in sunny California who was told her birth mother had been a young, troubled woman. And then Eleanor brought up the hospital. "I was born at St. Jude's in Portland," she wrote. The reply was a long pause, a typing ellipsis that seemed to last an eternity. "My parents said they adopted me from St. Jude's," Rosemary wrote back. The words hung in the air, a final, horrifying piece of the puzzle. Couldn't be a coincidence. The birthmark, the shared phobias, and now the same hospital. It was a smoking gun. That night, they moved to a video call. Eleanor was a nervous wreck, her hands shaking as she hit the call button. The screen flickered, and there she was. The face she had been staring at for weeks on a tiny phone screen was now a living, breathing reality. Eleanor felt a gasp escape her lips. It was like looking in a mirror. But the woman in the reflection was smiling, tears welling in her eyes, a reflection of Eleanor's own stunned, tearful face. They didn't need a DNA test. The proof was right there, in the way their eyes were the same shade of hazel, in the faint, identical lines around their mouths, in the perfect, impossible crescent birthmark above their brows. They were twins. The conversation that followed was a dizzying mix of tears, laughter, and a profound, bone-deep sorrow. They spoke for hours, a lifetime of conversation crammed into a single night. They discovered they had been born in the same place at the same time to the same mother. But their parents, the people who had raised them, had two different stories. Eleanor's parents said she was the sole, miraculous child. Rosemary's parents said she was an orphan, an adopted gift. The timelines didn't add up. The stories didn't match. Someone, somewhere, had deliberately, cruelly separated them. And for what reason? Who would do such a thing? The joy of finding each other was now mixed with a terrible, growing sense of dread. Their lives were built on a lie, a betrayal so monumental it was difficult to comprehend. And they both knew, in that shared moment of realization, that they weren't just sisters. They were victims, and their search for the truth had only just begun. The path ahead was dark, and they were about to walk it together. The immediate, overwhelming euphoria of their reunion was quickly replaced by a cold, hard determination. The joy was real, of course, a deep, soul-stirring sense of belonging that Eleanor had never felt before, but it was now overshadowed by a burning question. Why? Why were they separated? They had to confront their parents, a prospect that filled them both with a terrible mix of fear and anger. These were the people who had loved them, who had raised them, who had given them everything. But they had also kept a secret so profound it had changed the very course of their lives. Eleanor flew to California to meet Rosemary in person, the anxiety of the flight eclipsed by the surreal reality of seeing her twin sister waiting for her at the gate. The embrace was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a feeling of coming home to a person she had just met. They spent the first few days simply existing in each other's presence, marveling at the small, uncanny similarities, the shared gestures, the mirrored expressions. But the mystery gnawed at them, a constant, low-level hum of unease. They started with Rosemary's parents, the Finches. They were kind, gentle people, a little confused by the sudden appearance of a woman who looked exactly like their daughter. When Rosemary, with Eleanor by her side, finally asked them about her birth and adoption, their faces went pale. They confessed to the closed adoption, to the story they had always told her. But when the girls presented the evidence, the hospital, the birthmark, the matching birth dates, the cracks in their story began to show. Mr. Finch, his voice trembling, admitted that the adoption agency had been a little strange, a small, private clinic that had promised them a baby in an unusually short amount of time. The doctor's name, he recalled, was Dr. Alistair Thorne, a name that meant nothing to them. Yet, the real confrontation came with Eleanor's parents. They were devastated. The minute they saw Eleanor and Rosemary together, the pretense fell away. Tears streamed down her mother's face as she finally, haltingly, began to tell the story. A story she had been holding inside for over 3 decades. It wasn't a simple mistake. It was a conspiracy. She and her husband, Eleanor's father, had been a young couple, desperately wanting a child. They had tried for years, a series of heart-wrenching miscarriages and failed IVF treatments. A friend of her father's, a wealthy and influential man, had helped them. He had told them about a young, unmarried woman who was due to give birth to twins. The man's sister was infertile, and the plan was to have the woman give birth, keep one twin, and give the other to his sister. But the woman, their biological mother, had been a strong-willed artist, and she wanted to keep both of her babies. The family, a powerful and secretive dynasty, had gone to extreme lengths to get what they wanted. The truth was a gut punch. Their biological mother, a woman named Clara, had been pressured and manipulated. When she refused to give up one of her babies, the family had staged a terrible lie. They had faked a tragedy, making it look like Clara had died in childbirth, and then they had separated the twins, giving Rosemary to the Finches and keeping Eleanor themselves. Eleanor's parents, in their desperation for a child, had been told they were adopting a baby whose mother had passed away. They had no idea there was a twin. They had been lied to, manipulated, made to believe they were rescuing an orphan. The mastermind behind it all, the man who had pulled the strings, was the influential friend of Eleanor's father. His name, a name that made Eleanor's blood run cold, was Marcus Thorne. The same last name as the doctor. The tangled web was now unraveling at a terrifying pace. Dr. Alistair Thorne, the name from the Finch's adoption records, was a relative of the powerful Marcus Thorne. It was a family business, a macabre trade in human lives. They had orchestrated this entire thing, a quiet, ruthless operation, all to ensure their own family lines were preserved, their own desires fulfilled. They had taken a young woman's babies and destroyed her life, all without a second thought. And they had built a lie that had stood for nearly 4 decades. Eleanor and Rosemary, their hands now linked in a desperate grip, had a new mission. It wasn't just about finding out who they were. It was about finding out what happened to their mother. Was she truly dead? Or was that, too, a lie? The thought sent a jolt of ice through Eleanor's veins. The story she was a part of was no longer just about a lost sister. It was a story of conspiracy, of greed, and of a horrifying, decades-long deception. The trail was cold. The people involved were old and powerful, and they were about to stir a hornet's nest. But they had to, for their mother, for themselves, and for the truth, no matter how ugly it was. The name Alistair Thorne became an anchor, a single, undeniable point of truth in a sea of lies. Eleanor and Rosemary, now a united front, began to meticulously track him down. They found old hospital records, medical journals, and finally a fragile, outdated address. He was retired, living in a secluded home in the quiet suburbs of Massachusetts. It felt like a mission from an old movie, 2 women on a quest for justice, armed with nothing but a shared birthmark and a burning need for answers. They drove cross-country, the miles blurring by as they spoke about their lives, their dreams, the decades they had lost. The silence between them was no longer lonely. It was full of a shared purpose. They found him, Dr. Alistair Thorne, a frail, elderly man with a shock of white hair and a tremor in his hands. He was surprised to see them, and for a moment, a flash of fear crossed his face. He recognized the resemblance immediately. He invited them in, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were carrying the weight of a great burden. They sat in his dimly lit living room, the air thick with unspoken truths. They didn't have to say much. They just looked at him, Their twin faces a silent accusation. Finally, he broke. With a sigh that seemed to release decades of guilt, he began to speak. He confirmed everything. The plan orchestrated by his powerful cousin, Marcus Thorne. The desperation of Eleanor's parents for a child. The single, loving mother named Clara, who had refused to give up her babies. He confessed to forging the documents, to staging the fake medical emergency that led to their separation. He explained that Marcus had wanted to give Rosemary to his infertile sister, keeping Eleanor for himself. But the plan went awry when Eleanor's parents were manipulated into taking her, and Marcus was forced to cover his tracks even more. We told Clara that the hospital fire had claimed one of her babies, and the other was given up for adoption, he whispered, his voice raspy with shame. She was devastated. She never recovered. A cold wave washed over Eleanor. Is she alive? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor shook his head slowly. No. Marcus had to make sure there were no loose ends. He moved her to a different state, kept her isolated. She passed away 10 years ago. A broken heart, I think. She never stopped looking for her babies. The truth was a crushing blow. The mother they had found was a ghost, a victim of a cruel, powerful family. The doctor, in a final act of atonement, pulled out a small, leather-bound box. Inside, there was a worn photograph. It was a picture of a young woman with their eyes, their same smile. Her hair was pulled back, and she was holding a tiny, happy baby in each arm. Her face was radiant with a love so pure, so fierce. It leaped from the photograph. She loved you, Dr. Thorne said, his voice cracking. She never, ever stopped. Eleanor and Rosemary looked at the photograph of Clara, their mother, the woman they had lost before they even knew her. The grief was overwhelming, but it was not a solitary grief. It was shared, a beautiful and tragic bond forged by a lie and now sanctified by the truth. They finally understood the emptiness they had always felt. It wasn't a lack of love from their parents. It was the echo of a mother's heart, an unfillable void left by a twin sister they were never meant to meet. They drove home, a new kind of silence in the car. It was the silence of two people who had just been given a lifetime of history, a lifetime of sorrow, and a lifetime of hope. The story wasn't over. They had to decide what to do next. But for the first time in their lives, they weren't alone in the world. They had each other. And the woman in the photograph. It's a terrifying thing to think about all the secrets that exist just beneath the surface of our lives. The untold stories, the unwritten chapters. It took a viral video, an algorithm, and a tiny, perfect birthmark to bring this one to light. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other truths are out there, waiting for the right moment, the right person to reveal them? If this incredible journey, this shocking story of two lives torn apart and then brought back together, left you captivated, just imagine what other stories are waiting to be told. So, if you want to be the first to hear the next deep dive, the next true story that will leave you speechless, don't forget to like this video. And if you want to be part of our community as we uncover more jaw-dropping truths, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching and stay curious.